Hello, this episode is brought to you by Edwanna Travel. Call 909-841-7628 or go to edwannatravel.com for 15% off your next travel quote. Hello and welcome back to Isimo Podcast. Isimo Podcast.
You're a little bit early on that one.
Yeah, no, he does it when he wants to, and I like it. I like that. I like that about Ryan. He does whatever he wants whenever he wants.
He has the freedom to Isimo Podcast whenever he wants, and I support that.
Yeah, I mean, it was right there the whole time. I mean, you didn't see it. Ryan saw it.
Okay.
Hey, welcome. My name is Gerardo Alarcon.
I'm Dominic Angel.
And I'm Ryan Reyes.
And go ahead and follow us on Instagram if you haven't already. Instagram pod. Isimo Pod at ISIMOPOD. Email us at isimopod@gmail.com. Follow us. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on Spotify. Please leave a review on Apple Podcasts. And today, just to get right into it, I wanted to say up front that we're going to be talking about Cuba-Isimo. Okay. Isimo Cuba. Okay.
Very nervous.
So before we talk about Cuba, I wanted to say a couple things. Is that okay with you guys?
Yes, please say the things.
I just wanted to say, if you don't know what's happening in Cuba, go ahead and look it up before watching this. If you find that we're saying something wrong, go ahead and correct us in the comments. We are 3 comedians that are complete idiots, especially these 2. I'm just kidding. Sorry about that. I'll cut that part out. No, I won't. But what's happening in Cuba is not right. And I think it's safe to say that all 3 of us stand for libertad in Cuba.
Yep.
Freedom. So before we go on into anything we say today, I just wanted that to be very clear.
Yeah, just to add on a little bit, obviously we should be more informed. Many people should be more informed. We try to cram as much research as we can in a short amount of time. Some of the stuff I'm going to misremember. Some of the stuff we're not going to be totally informed on what is going on. So just please bear with us. We're just trying to piece things together as the same as anybody else.
We're doing our best, right, Ryan?
We're doing our best.
Just give us a couple of years and we'll know all about Cuba.
Yeah.
So, with that being said, what's happening in Cuba right now? I'm just kidding. I did some research. I don't know how to start this. I just wanted to make that clear. If we do make mistakes, please correct us in the comments. We'll engage with you guys. And also, feel free to express how you feel in the comment section. With that being said, who wants to start?
Okay, so my rough understanding of what's happening in Cuba at the moment is the people are displeased with the current government and they are protesting and they want essentially a government change, a regime change. They're demanding that, I forgot the guy's name, but the current president to step down.
Yeah.
And they want government change. And in response to that, in response to the protests, the government has shut off internet and also has encouraged supporters of the government to essentially combat the protesters, and is also arresting people and shooting people that are been known to be supporters of the protest. This is all culminated because of a year and a half of COVID, of scarce food, health supplies, medical care, stuff like that. It's the issue of COVID has exacerbated present conditions in Cuba. It's been an ongoing problem for decades, but essentially the people have said enough is enough and we want change.
Yeah, that's pretty much how I understood it as well. Is there are a lot of factors that contributed to its worsening, but it was a thing of none of these things are specifically the catalyst for it. They were just things that made it worse. They made a thing that was already happening worse.
Yeah. Did you guys know that there's a song playing in Cuba right now that if you listen to it or play it on a speaker loudly, then you get arrested? And it's basically, from my understanding, this is something I heard from a second hand. The song is based around a saying in Cuba, which is motherland or die. But the song in Spanish means motherland and live. Right. So this song that I don't know if it was like it was probably one of the many straws that broke the camel's back of these protests happening. But if you do play that song now, you will go to jail, which is one of the many, like, you know, that whole sentiment of like, if you have anything negative to say about the government, you go to fucking jail. Like,
Yeah.
that's something that we take for granted here in America. We can say anything we want. I was gonna say something crazy, but we can say anything we want in America about our government and not really see any kind of hardcore repercussions from it, you know? Just playing a song, and like that goes to show the power of art also, you know? Maybe the song caused some people that were, I don't know, on the fence about protesting against the communist government of Cuba to go out there and actually protest against it.
Yeah.
The power of art, you know, the power of podcasting too. You know?
Yeah. I mean, it's all about expression. Like, one of the biggest problems with the current conditions in Cuba is people are not only complaining about, or not, I don't want to say complaining, but people are not only unhappy with the government's response to COVID and like the health resources. It's like an ongoing issue of like freedom of expression and just like a repressive government.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, to only give medical supplies or vaccines to people that have access to American dollars, because you have to be able to buy these medical supplies in American currency.
Yeah.
When I think you told me Cuba is living off the peso, you know, at least working class people, I believe.
Yeah, it's weird because the Cuba functions on the peso, but it, like, for a lot of things you need to pay with American dollars. And because of COVID, because of travel restrictions, they've lost tourism, which has been like one of the main sources of income for the country. And also like mules bringing in money into the country. That kind of helps with like keeping things afloat. And like without that combined with the U.S. embargo on the country for the last like 60 years or something like that, like it's put Cuba in a precarious space.
Yeah, I agree with that. It does. Maybe the embargo does have something to do with it, but also I see the embargo as a scapegoat for a greedy Cuban government.
Oh yeah, no, I definitely agree. I think, well, first of all, the U.S. embargo on Cuba is wrong. Like, just flat out, it's wrong. It was instituted as a way to punish Cubans. There's so much history to go back into, like, to understand that. The embargo is wrong. It's meant as a punishment of communism. Really, I don't agree with these things, because when you do something like an embargo, you're not punishing the people that you are unhappy with. You're not punishing the government. You're punishing the people of Cuba. And I don't think that that's fair. But at the same time, it is used as like a communist or of the government's talking point of saying like, this is why we're running out of medical supplies. This is why we're running out of food and all kinds of stuff, is because of they're blaming the United States embargo on all of this, when that's kind of just not the case. And again, the unrest in Cuba is about more than just trade.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I believe, and Ryan, chime in anytime you want to. I know it's just me and Dom like going back and forth here. Sorry about that. But I also believe that the Cuban Communist Party is at a dead end here. Like, at first, the Soviet Union had the back of Cuba, and then in 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed, caused Cuba to kind of like tank. And also, when they were with Soviet Union, they were tanking economically. But imagine your number one backer, the second world country, like stopping their funding for you because they collapsed themselves. Right. And then they went on to get fuel or oil from Venezuela for cheaper because they were giving goods to them, which also the U.S. embargo kind of thing cut off all trade to any American country, South American and North American.
Oh,
from
really?
what I understand. I could be wrong.
I didn't know that it was that extreme.
Yeah. So for them to go to Venezuela to get these things, also Venezuela, you know, decades later goes under a dictatorship and collapses themselves. The Venezuelan dollar tanks in like 2018 or something. Yeah. It causes Cuba to again scurry and find another benefactor, I guess. I don't know if that's the right word. Is that the right word? Not benefactor. Fuck. You know, backer. whatever. I'm Gerardo Alarcon. I don't know anything.
Yeah.
Wait, what?
No. I just like I was answering. I think benefactor is kind of an inappropriate word.
Yeah, it's inappropriate. Yeah. Anyways, now and then at the same time, Obama lifted the touring, the what's it called, the tourist
certain restrictions.
certain restrictions. You were allowed to travel to Cuba. A lot of rappers went out there and were like, "Look at me, chico chico." You know what I mean? That's my understanding. And then, Trump came into office and cut that shit off.
Yeah.
There was something from that I read or saw about how he just basically cut off tourism. But
all of the restrictions that Obama was going to lift and did lift, essentially he just reversed them. Trump just reversed them.
Yeah.
Because there is the big thing. This is what like people need to remember of like when we talk about like American involvement in Cuba and in any country, really. It's just like, okay, so we understand that there's a lot of Cuban Americans and people that hate Yolanda.
Oh, keep going.
Nobody hates you.
There's a lot of people that hate the government in Cuba for good reason.
Yeah.
And what that's bred is a lot of Cuban Americans in Florida that, I don't want to say bred because that sounds weird, but that's caused a lot of Cuban Americans and people that have left the country to become Republican, as we see with a lot of immigrants, particularly from Latin America.
Yeah.
That they become Republican because they hate the conditions that they fled. Yeah. So when we look at American involvement in these countries, a lot of it is a resentment for that government, and it's used to kind of rally support in political candidates in the United States. Trump only did that because he wanted Republican Cubans to vote for him in the election.
I don't know if that's true, but
and anytime we talk about like what president or what certain candidates or what certain, especially around elections, it's always about, the questions are always about like, can we garner support for votes?
Yeah.
Like, and I really believe, because that was a big question with the 2020 election. That was a big problem with Bernie Sanders versus Trump. Was that people didn't want socialism because, a lot of Latin Americans said, like, we left our homes to come to a country that's not socialist, that's not communist. So that was a hard sell for conservative Latinos to vote for somebody like Bernie Sanders versus somebody like Trump.
Yeah, I from my understanding and what I believe, because I know people that have fled Venezuela, and I know Cubans, chicos. Yeah. Yeah, there's, in my opinion, communism suppresses excellence. You're not really incentivized to excel in whatever you're doing.
Okay, so there's two sides to this. I don't agree with that on the surface because we've seen historically, before I get into this, I will say I think that communism is a tool for dictatorship, and it opens the ground for corrupt power, right? But at the same time, like we've seen historically, the Soviet Union and Cuba during the initial, like the 60s to probably the 70s to the 80s, maybe a little bit less, but we've seen huge advancements in science and education, in medicine, in agriculture within these countries.
But with Cuba saying that they have one of the best healthcare systems, not systems, but maybe healthcare in general, like how do you say, like medicines? They
had advanced medicine, yes.
But they're not giving it to the working class, and the working class has no real opportunity to showcase themselves and get those what's it called, the benefits of medical care that is so excellent. In my opinion, with people getting enslaved when they want to leave the country for years and then being left with nothing afterwards, to come to America and dry feet, wet soul, whatever the saying was.
Yeah, wet foot, dry foot, I think is what it's called. But that was for Haitians. I think it was for certain, like...
Yeah. It was for people coming to Florida. Let's just say that.
Right.
You come here with nothing, forced by a communist government.
Right.
That puts you... If you try to do it the right way, you get enslaved for years after getting everything taken from you and your family. Then you and your family can come over with nothing.
Right.
And that, in my opinion, any government that does that to anyone, and I'm not putting this against anyone, communists, fucking capitalists, any government that does that is, there's no checks and balances there. It's a negative thing, obviously.
Right. Do you have anything to say to this, Ryan?
Yeah. Well, that was something that I was also going to touch on between what you guys were saying, because a similar thing can be said about certain aspects of American resources. Like, it is a statistical fact that we rank in math and science like 24th and 36th, something like that, lower than a lot of other sovereign states. But it's also a stated fact that we have access to some of the largest sources of those same categories of knowledge. And so it's like we, from a technical standpoint, have the best education system. It's a similar issue with, as you were saying, in Cuba, where it's like whether or not we have access to that in a general sense as citizens is different. So like we have it, but not everyone has access to it. Right.
Yeah. Like you were saying with the the medical advancements in Cuba and how the people are affected by it. You can say that the United States has the best medical care in the country, but who has access to it? I don't have insurance. You don't have insurance. This fool's on Medi-Cal. And that's good because you didn't have to pay anything, but your access to healthcare is very limited.
Yeah.
And they make it hard, for its own citizens. All the issues that we've seen, and this isn't a defense of Cuba's communist government. Certainly not. This is to point out all of those issues that we've seen. Getting arrested for no reason, slavery. We still have modern slavery. Like, people don't view it that way, but the incarceration rate in the United States is the largest in the world, and that they're essentially slaves. They're made, the prisoners are made to be slaves. We have racism. We have inequality in healthcare, inequality in education. We have some of the poorest citizens in the world. Like I forget the exact rate of hungry children in the country is like huge. So again, it's not a defense of the communist government, but it's to say like it's easy to demonize. I just want to make it clear like where we show our support for certain things, because then people use these as tools to say like, okay, well we need to overthrow their government. We need American intervention. We need to do this, that, or the other thing for these people, and it's like we're not even getting those things here. Like, to Joe Biden gave a speech that said like, we support the Cuban protesters. They're fighting for a beautiful thing. They're fighting for freedom and for themselves. But what happened with the George Floyd protest? What happened? The vice president is Kamala Harris, who is like one of the most aggressive DAs in California history. Like, has sent many people to jail, and the people that are protesting during all of 2020, how many of those people did we see? We have video evidence of aggressive tactics from the police, militarized police. We've seen people get picked up off the streets and put into unmarked vans. We've seen so much of these same things in our own country that we're saying like, look at all these terrible things that are happening in this country.
But also, I think we're arguing systemic problems in different governments.
Right.
Which is something that I think Cuba has a lot more groundwork to do than America does. Personally, I don't know. Enslaving people literally is never a good thing.
No.
Here, it is done through a certain amount of checks and balances. Yeah, there's videos of people that go to jail wrongly and don't really see their innocence, proven ever. And that's terrible. But I would say in comparison to literal enslavement, those are somewhat isolated incidents. Not saying all of them are. I'm not trying to make that assumption. But in comparison, because we're talking about Cuba and not so much the American government, because I don't think it's a compare and contrast type situation here. Yes, America has their problems, but there's a large population of people on an island below Florida that are being fucked in the mouth and the ass. Sorry, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, well, I think that should be a point to be made, is that it shouldn't be a comparative issue. It's more like, I think what Dom was trying to say when I was trying to touch on earlier is it's more of a thing of like certain things can happen. They're not about the kind of government. It's about who's in charge and what they're doing specifically. Like, they can do a similar thing and be this kind of government. We can do something identical and be a completely different kind of government. It's like you're saying, it's isolated instances of a similar thing happening. Like, also to touch back on the slavery thing, I unfortunately can't remember the source, but there is a book that covers this, and there was news articles about it, but there was like literally plantations that just never acknowledged the abolition of slavery, and they were functioning well into the 1960s.
Yeah.
And there's also like I think a book that I've read it on audiobook, so I didn't read it, but I read it, and a lot through Dominic. Was it the new Jim Crow, where it's like it was also a lot of plantations transferred the way they functioned into prisons, where they would rent out inmates to do hard labor. Yeah, but also
just to go back to what I was saying is that we're not comparing the two.
Yeah,
Cuba is in a terrible position right now.
Yeah,
America, we can go to the Grove and get a bunch of fucking novelty sauces and complain about how they're not hot.
Right.
That's our protest. Me calling a bunch of different hot sauce companies and saying, what the fuck was this? It's tomato sauce, basically, Anyway, sorry, I get stuck on that a lot. But, those kind of issues. Yeah, I think we do live in a bubble of Los Angeles. And, we are brown and not black, which historically LAPD has had a bad rap with black people, So maybe we don't experience life the same way that other Americans do. But in Cuba, it's a general, you're reassured that if you are working class, then you are stuck to this communist party's ideologies where you cannot succeed and you cannot excel. People are crying for freedom as opposed to crying for systemic changes, They want freedom. They don't want their government anymore. They want to be free. How you attack that as a solution, I have no clue. I think it's just an interesting thing to talk about because we have a completely different perspective. You drive by Portos in West Covina, or Covina. I don't know what the fuck it's called anymore. Is it Covina or West Covina?
It's West Covina.
It's okay. See, I was right. So don't fucking. I'm just kidding. You drive by Portos in West Covina, and you see a bunch of Cuban flags. You see a bunch of Cuban protesters trying to make people aware of this because of those different perspectives or different views that we carry. Anyways.
Well, the point that I'm trying to get at about that is it's not to say that America has the exact same situation or that it should be compared, but it's the contrary. It's to point out it's for the people that are saying that this is specifically because they're communist, and it's like that's not necessarily true. That things like that can happen regardless of the kind of government they are, and that's not to say that they don't need a regime change. They do, but it's about them being under a dictatorship. But
also, I think if you want to show that it's not because they're communist, then show me another communist country that doesn't have these same issues, that's succeeding in the same way. Kind of, instead of comparing it to a capitalist nation that we live in,
That's what I'm saying. Is it's the comparison isn't to show that. The comparison is specifically to show that these issues can exist without it being communist. Like these issues do exist in capitalist countries as well. That's what I'm saying. Not all of them and not to the very same extent, but it still exists.
Well, like I said before, this is why this might disappoint a lot of people because of the rhetoric that I've used in previous episodes, but I at this point in time do not consider myself to be a full fledged communist, right?
Yeah.
Because one, it's a whole movement that I haven't read up on, but also it's a thing that we've seen there's a lot of ideologies within communism, within Marxism, that I agree with on a
base level,
philosophical level.
Uh-huh.
And everything is good in theory, but like the way that it's been implemented historically, communism breeds corruption. It breeds absolute power. We've seen it, with Marxists, Leninists. Like when the Soviet Union started, we see all of these advancements, and that we can point to all of these things. Even just like, okay, going back to the Fidel Castro thing, like what the regime change then with the revolution, we also have to remember that before the regime change, that the reason why that was happening was because the current political system, which I believe was democratic, was President Batista that was put in by the United States after the Spanish-American War, or like leading up after the Spanish-American War. That was 50 years later. So I'm all over the place with this, but that they were having their own issues with corruption then. So that's why Fidel Castro, Che Guevara stepped in, and there was that revolution. And in the recent years following the regime change, there was a lot of advancements. The same thing with the Soviet Union. But what starts to happen with that is, because it's a political takeover and it's a violent takeover, you have all kinds of things like paranoia. You have addiction to power, and all kinds of things that forced people to not force people, but it allowed. That takeover allowed for Fidel Castro to do things like imprison his opponents, kill detractors. He also did things like he allowed people to leave periodically. I think there was like 3 major waves of just like allowing Cubans to leave if they wanted to, and that kind of helped keep things at bay, like keep support in Cuba. It also hurt them in a lot of ways.
But like, to stop you for a little bit,
right?
That's why I love America. I love America's democracy. I love America's capitalist values, simply because there needs to be checks and balances. Now, the government has kind of evolved over a longer period of time than any communist nation that I've seen into some sort of mafia type, kiss the ring leadership.
Right.
There's still those checks and balances, though, where different political parties, there's only 2 really, can have control of different legislative branches, like legislative, executive, and Congress, Am I wrong? What's the third one?
Wait, what?
There's executive, legislative, and judicial. There we go.
Yeah.
I'm a fucking idiot. Anyways.
President, Congress, and the Supreme Court.
Yeah. So, in my opinion, there is no checks and balances if there's an opportunity for a dictator to take hold of a communist nation and like secure all what do they call it? Commodities for themselves. Right. You should be able to get fucking toilet paper, dude, as a citizen of a country.
Right. I mean, again, like, I don't agree with dictatorship. I don't agree with corrupt power, absolute power. I do agree with checks and balances, but at the same time, I don't want this to get into a comparison with the United States.
Yeah.
But I also don't agree that there's checks and balances with capitalism within the United States. I don't think that we have an absolute dictator, but we have a ruling class. We have people that historically have reached a certain level of power that pass that down to their kids or to whomever, and like it's a circle of people. It's now it's a smaller group of people that have the same control. So, but look, I don't want this to turn into a comparison of like one versus the other. Like the number one thing that I always want to drive home is like, I support the people of Cuba. I'm always on the side of the people to get freedom, to get liberation, to get what they want. If they're being oppressed, if they're being repressed and they're suffering, then I support the people. That's the number one thing. The same thing with the people in the United States. That's why I have an ACAB shirt, and like I am anti-capitalist and many other things is I believe in power belonging to the people, and I don't think we have that in either country. But right now we're talking about Cuba. I support them, and I'm still learning. I don't know the ways to help them in their cause right now. If anybody knows, let me know. If there are ways that I can help, I am willing to do that.
Well, I think we're doing our best here just talking about it. That's why at the beginning I wanted to make sure that people go look this shit up. Don't just listen to us talk about this and think this is real. Like, what we're saying here is just a conversation that three dudes looked into different articles and videos and are just regurgitating those things they saw. We're not fucking historians. We're not
political
financiers.
scientists.
We're not scientists. We're just three comedians. Chico, all right? You know what I'm saying? But all that being said, I just think that we're doing the best that we can. We already have an episode done, but we wanted to do this one instead. And I think that's, as little as we can do. Like I said, we're three fucking comedians that did that whole hot sauce journey. Like, people have different lives. Yeah. And I think kind of shining a light on those people, for even if it's just 30 minutes, I think we're doing the best that we can in just doing this. Having an open conversation and willing to be vulnerable about our actual feelings, whether it's towards communist versus capitalist economic systems, or just saying that Cuba needs freedom. The people of Cuba, they should just, we have technology now to make Florida huge. We could just build landmass underneath the ocean for 90 miles and just make all of Cuba Florida. And then, I don't know, annex the fucking country.
I don't believe in annexing the countries. I think we should give power back.
We have a bad history. Like, look at the last country we annexed was Hawaii, and there's like a bunch of shit there, just like where we kind of fucking overthrew whatever system they had before.
Yeah, that's the thing with that. Again, that's the thing with American intervention. Whenever there's American intervention assistance, that leaves room for them to be like. That's the whole reason for. I'm not even going to get into the history, but I'm like, whenever we've seen American intervention, we've seen problems like within the country, and also like it's a weird position for the United States to take it when it comes to communism, because look, I agree that this is an oppressive government and that slavery is wrong, false imprisonment is wrong, murder is wrong. But also we're allies with Saudi Arabia. We're allies with a lot of corrupt governments because it benefits the country financially, politically or militarily, however.
Financially is like encompasses all of those.
Yeah. So again, my biggest thing with all of this is, again, I'll say it 100 times, is I support the people of Cuba, and if we all could find ways to help, like, we're going to do that. And I encourage everybody to research. If you haven't heard about Cuba, hopefully that we aren't the fucking like breaking the story for you guys. But if we are, I definitely encourage you to research what's happening in Cuba. Look up Cuban creators or news sources that are telling you the facts. It's a weird thing hearing news from America, because when you have something like Fox or MSNBC, it's very politically driven, and it is, again, they focus too much, I think, on the whole communist thing, when it's like, listen to what the people want. Like, don't fuck like the government relationships between the United States and Cuba, and just focus on the people. Listen to the people. The people right now, from what I've heard, primarily the sentiment is, look, we don't want, people in Cuba are saying they don't want American intervention. They want to be able to solve this on their own. They want them to remove the blockades, which is what they call the U.S. embargo, and they want a regime change. They want a government change. So those three aspects, I think we should continue to support and push those voices.
I agree. Cuba, I don't know if it's still happening right now, but they cut off the internet.
Yeah, they cut off the internet, so it's hard to tell like what is actually going on. They did that to save face. The current president, fuck that fool. Like,
yeah, Joe Biden sucked. I'm just kidding.
That was a definite, like, something that someone touched on in one of the not debates, but like the sources that we were listening to. was specifically like it has the aura of like he doesn't know how to handle that specific thing because that's a relatively new thing for them is having a source of internet for everyone and having to like deal with people who have influence on the internet.
Social media is a powerful tool.
Yeah, and it's we've seen how that can the ups and downs of that and how that can affect people. That's something relatively new to Cuba is having a younger generation who has that and knows how to use that and I would say like that's one of the biggest reasons why we know in the first place what's going on before they turned it off, and that's what scared them so quickly and why they did things like, I unfortunately forget her name, so I would look this up if you can. But there was, they specifically spoke on a girl who, she was just like a vlogger, like literally like a week before she joined the protest, her mom was like giving advice about dating on her YouTube account and her TikTok. And then now she's like at protests and like, I think a couple weeks later, in the middle of an interview, authorities arrived to take her to jail. And then she was like arrested right after the interview ended.
Yeah.
It's insane.
Yeah, I mean, like what I said at the top, just like playing a song, you go to jail.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's crazy. If you're listening this far, do yourself a favor. Look up what's happening in Cuba. Look up what's happening in Colombia. Look up what's happening in Mexico. If you're a Latino, give a shit, basically. You know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Also, even read the histories of like the Colombian banana thing. Or what is it? The Guatemalan banana crisis. These are interesting stories. I mean, Fidel Castro took over Cuba in a yacht. You know what I mean? Like that alone, I don't know. How you do something is how you do everything. I told you on the phone the other day, I feel when I was younger, I always thought that Fidel Castro and Che Guevara just wanted their own country and they fucking found a way to do it. I was a really stupid, little kid that was in AP US history.
Right.
Thinking about that kind of stuff. Anyways, sorry.
Oh, no, I just wanted to say, I wish I would have touched on this in the beginning so more people would have heard it. But we also need to remember that the people that are most impacted by this are like Black and like indigenous Cuban, like white Americans. Everybody's feeling this, but like this is heavily affecting Black Cubans. And so that's why stuff like this is so important whenever we discuss like issues within Latin America. Who's being affected by this primarily, and it's the poorest, most vulnerable people are the ones that we need to support.
Yeah.
Also, feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments. I would like to see a discussion happening in the comments, not for our benefit, just to fucking learn more about other perspectives of what's happening. We are privileged ass white passing Mexicans that have tiny mustaches, talking about Cuba. So I want to hear what other people have to say, especially if you're Cuban and you listen to this.
Yeah.
That's all I really want.
And if anybody has any resources that you can drop, like I'm going to continue researching.
Yeah.
But if anybody knows of any resources, knows of like how we can help, I don't even know if there's like, I know one of the things is that the Cuban government has they opened up their borders for outsiders to come and bring supplies and stuff for people that they know. And I know primarily people in Florida are doing this, or some people are either sending goods or paying people. So I don't know. I literally just learned about that before I walked in here. So I'm going to research that to see if there's a way to like send supplies and stuff like that to Cuba. Well,
thank you for watching. This has been Isimo Podcast. Please follow us on Instagram if you haven't already, Isimo Pod. Email us at isimopod@gmail.com. Subscribe to the YouTube. Leave a like. Comment if you'd like. Follow us on Spotify. And leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Thank you very much. My name is Gerardo Larcon.
I'm Dominic Angel.
I'm Ryan Reyes.
And don't fly.
Don't fly.